I'm looking down to the entrance to the Great Wall of China at Jinshanling. It's actually a cable car, but I don't see where it is just yet. Maybe it'll come into view a little further. So I've passed the first and second towers, and I'm here off on a spur that allowed them to control the pass here at Jinshanling. By giving them the ability to flank anyone trying to come through the pass. It was about a 3-hour ride from Beijing on the dot. I did the trip through my hostel, which I think is the best way to visit. Very low stress, a bit more expensive, but for something like this, it's worth the extra expense. One of the signs said that the view looking either this way or the way we were looking as we walked up is what they show every morning on CCTV. I guess it's similar to back when they used to have the national anthem and the flag before the networks went off the air for the night. Was that back in like the 1950s? You're not supposed to smoke up here. I think they're worried about fire. That tourist was having a cigarette, and it was really noxious. I think it's insensitive to people who are trying to enjoy themselves and exerting themselves, especially in China. We come out here on a clear day. I waited for 2 weeks for a nice day to get out here and not have smog, and someone's smoking a cigarette when I take my rest break. And this is one of the less touristy areas to visit of the Great Wall. Badaling is the area that folks go to for it's the most heavily restored area, but it's like supposed to be the McDonald's version of the Great Wall, which I don't think is such a bad thing. It's something to consider if you're only here for a short amount of time and you want to combine it with a trip to the Ming tombs. It's very close to that. You could do them both in the same day, Badaling. This area is much further to get to. I was concerned about doing a trip too with such a large group of people. If I had 15-20 people on our little bus that the hostel contracted with to ride us out here. But you don't have much interaction. Most people are coupled up and sleep on the way up. And then once you get on the wall, you can spread out and do your own thing. I don't think you need to worry about dehydration. There's plenty of touts selling liquids. They'll charge you a bit more, but I've heard it depends on how thirsty you look, what they're gonna charge. But you know, for the sake of not becoming dehydrated, you pay 10 yuan instead of, you know, a bottle of water. If you bought a big case of them at the gas station we stopped at on the way here, it could have cost you as little as 20 yuan for, you know, 25 bottles, probably less than 1 yuan each. So yeah, you're paying 10 times what it probably should cost, but that's still maybe $1.50, 10 yuan, so still cheaper than getting a bottle of water in the airport in the United States. Jinshanling Great Wall. Brief introduction of barrier walls. And it says the same thing. Not only defense, but also counterattack. Pioneering work in the Great Wall of G-Town. So you can see here we were out on the transverse earlier, the square terrace. These steps get pretty steep. I've heard the incline in places on the wall can be as much as 70%. Excuse me. Really is nice to have the umbrella though, to prevent glare, not just for your own eyes but the camera. The view doesn't change all that dramatically, but every time you come up, you can't help stare. I don't know if it wears off after a few kilometers. I think the more likely thing to happen is you get tired. Oh. And the view stays the same, but your perspective becomes more aggravated and irksome. Brief introduction of the General Tower. 1569, restored 1985. To the north of the tower, the layout of the beacon tower's buttress walls, horse blocking walls, Y walls, and the barrier walls on both sides of east and west in hierarchical strategy pattern from far to near forms an impregnable and distinctive defense system. It stands out as the most fascinating example of architecture along the entire Great Wall. General Tower. Military defense system specification of the General Tower. To the north of the Jiangzhen General Tower, the layout of beacon towers, buttress walls, horse blocking walls, Y walls, and the barrier walls on both sides off east and west in hierarchical strategy, pattern from far to near, is the essence of the military defense system of the Great Wall. Beacon towers are used to early discover and deliver military information. That's where they burn the wolf and horse dung. Buttress walls are used to guard the general building and defend the enemy's attack on Zhuangdou Pass and Shaling Pass. Horse blocking walls are used to prevent the enemy's horses from getting close to the Great Wall. Wei Walls are used to defend the enemy's direct attack to the general building. Barrier walls are used to defend the further attack to the general buildings of the enemies who have already took the riding track of the Great Wall. Let's see, general towers here. Horse blocking walls. So these are the outer walls here, huh? I guess you couldn't get a horse over. Too high for the horse to get over. So men would have to stop and climb. Or slow them down enough to be shot at with arrows, I guess. These beacon tower. So that would slow down an attack at least. They'd have to dismount. Meet the famous Great Wall photographer. This way. I'm really glad I came out here. Look at this magnificence. It's brilliant. The General Pavilion, highest point middle, Jinshanling Great Wall. General Qi Guang. Hello. Ah, very pretty.
Yeah, my book.
You take all these photos, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Books.
Cool.
My post.
Very pretty. Is that the highway bridge we came over? I think it is. As we approached. Show me the way to go home. Tired and I wanna go to bed. I had a drink about an hour ago.
不客气。J'ai un peu peur qu'on soit en retard, mais c'est juste que là, c'est aménagé. Parce qu'il n'y a personne. Non, il y a le
Do, 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 do. That's a good view of it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the last tower that I'm going to exit at will have 5 holes in it. And that's the way to distinguish it, so you don't end up walking past it. But the general tower is this one, 3. So in quick succession, we're going to walk over several more of these. The nice thing about hiking the Great Wall is you're essentially ridge walking. The wall was designed to take advantage of the natural terrain, so it always follows ridge lines and makes for the highest point. Probably was a nightmare to construct. Today, if we were going to build something like this, it would be with helicopters. Oh no, it's blocked off. What am I going to do? Make sure my hat's on. Tight. A little windy. A little brisk. Oops. Oh, give me that. I've already ripped it. I'll ask for another one. Got these by the thousands, I'm sure. For my souvenir postcard.
So it's beautiful well from here.
Just be careful you don't walk right off the edge. I don't know how much information the personal tour guide who walks with you on the wall gives you. That lady was saying 2,000 years ago the soldiers had to carry all these bricks. It's like, yeah. Who else was gonna do it? The emperor? I'm sure they had mules. That's the thing though about the Great Wall of China. I think the CCP has adopted this as a symbol of national unity, which it is, but don't give a false impression that this was this was never at any time one continuous wall. Never. Each province was in charge of building, their section of it, maintaining and garrisoning it. And the Mongols rode right through the gaps. I mean, come on. And then by the time of the Ming, the Mongols are less of a threat into the Qing. So just, the Ming build up the wall, thinking, oh, the Mongols are going to invade again. And the Manchus kind of take over. And it just falls into disrepair. So most of the sections that are touristy are the Ming constructions. Otherwise, if you go all the way back to the Jin or something, then it's deteriorated, nothing more than a dirt mound. Going back 2,000 years, West Tower started to be built 1569. Originally it was timbered and restored as masonry. It was divided into 2 stories, but now it has already collapsed and ruined. It was built with stairs in order to fence the enemies coming to the road, and so it achieves special function. If one man guards the pass, 10,000 are unable to get through. So we're coming right up now on Shaling Pass. Dark Tower. Dangerous. One man enter, 10 man leave. 10 men enter, 1 man leave. 1 man enter, no man leave. So I guess technically we've already gone over the steepest part of the walk, and now we got a nice downhill. And we undulate a little over the Dragon's Back. There's a nice hike I'll do this winter in Hong Kong. I didn't get to it last time I was in Hong Kong, which was the Dragon's Back over on the south end of the island. Doing this in the rain wouldn't be very pleasant at all, would it? Got my big old umbrella. I wish I could travel with my golf umbrella. That thing's enormous. And it stands up to like 30-mile-an-hour winds. Don't go nowhere. But it's too big to ever fit in a suitcase. Supposedly, airlines will make an exception for stuff like that. Umbrellas, if you actually look at their guidelines. Like I always fly United, and they say on their website that there's a special exemption for little things that are like umbrellas that really don't take any extra space in the carry-on bin overhead, you know, because they're so skinny and round. So even if every person on the plane had an umbrella, it wouldn't really matter, you know. But try telling that to TSA. Fucking go crazy on you. It's one of the things I hate about travel now. You have to like have a conversation about like all this personal shit with TSA people. Last time I came to China, the Port Authority police were on the jetway. After I had put my ticket through, walking down the jetway, a Port Authority cop stopped me and asked me all these like really personal questions, like how much money I had on me and where I get my money from and who I was visiting. And I was like, I understand that like you're doing your job, but I'm not trying to cause a problem. I want to get on this flight. This is really personal stuff, and you're asking me in a semi-public area. I have no idea who's listening next to me, people walking down the jetway. And I'll answer your questions, but I think that you should have a procedure for doing this. You could easily take me aside when I was sitting for an hour before my flight, you know? But it was just a random thing. I wasn't being singled out because I was suspicious. It was just completely random, you know? I thought, okay. And then I was talking to some of the crew, and they're like, yeah, they do that because they like to catch people off guard. And that's the whole thing. If they feel like they can catch you off guard, they could catch you in a lie or something, you know. And I guess they've had problems with people bringing more currency in and out of the country than they're allowed. And I'm like, you know, that don't violate my rights because you are doing shoddy police work, you know. Like, you want to catch the criminals who are doing that? Do some police work, you know. I'm sure there's a better way to catch them than randomly going up to tourists on the jetway and asking them invasive and personal questions that are like, you know, off-putting. And I mean, he was a nice cop. He's like, just give me simple answers and you'll be on your way. And I was like, okay, I'll give you simple answers, you know. Told him like how much money I had and who I was visiting and, you know, like what my job was, blah blah. And it's like, that's the kind of thing that I feel like whenever they talk about they hate us for our freedom and all that kind of stuff, and then you actually look at like the hassle you have to go through a lot of times, levels of security. It's not really all that free now, is it? People complain about China being like restrictive and communist regime. People, you know, care much less here if I take a video of something that might be copyrighted, you know, or something, than they do in the United States. The dark side of that is if I was like ripping off some mass-produced item by the hundreds of thousands and underselling the person who makes it, If I'm taking an hour-long video and I happen to have a few things incidentally that are copyrighted in it, you know, BFD, big fucking deal, you know, they don't care. They'll go crazy over that stuff in the United States, so who's more free? Who has more access to information in that respect? I think that's one of the problems we have in the United States. Like, you have to make a compromise between all these things. Whereas, like, in a lot of other places, they're just really non-issues, you know? I was talking to someone from New Zealand or something. He was like, you know, that security stuff is so much more relaxed in my country. Whenever I go through a big industrialized Western country, he's like, I'm shocked, you know. I put up with it, but brief introduction of Jinshanling Pass. Jinshanling Ku, known as Jinshanling Pass, was built in 1368. Was an important pass of Jinshanling Great Wall. It was one of the main passages in and out of the pass. It was divided into inner and outdoor. In order to fence the intruder, it was guarded by a great number of troops. There were a commander-in-chief bureau on the hill ridge within 150 meters inside the pass, but now only sites remain. Doo-doo-doo. I wonder how many troops were here. So you have this big wall, and then there's just this tiny wooden door here. Wonder how they had it barricaded originally. Obviously, they probably didn't have a door like this here. This is a modern thing, but assume it was something similar. Essentially, probably the same thing. Hey, this door's open. Oh. Hello. You know how they put these together with the lime mortar? Well, this is refurbished, but originally it was lime, cement, and glutinous rice. That's what I've read was the recipe. So starch and lime. They should have people checking passports here on the Great Wall. Since you're passing through a secure area. Yeah, I thought that was ridiculous on the jetway. It's like, really? You have a whole TSA security area where you should be doing this, you know? I'll put up with it if you put it in a certain area and I can do it. I can go through the security and then I'm through it. It's over with. I've jumped through the hoops, you know? But that's when I think you have a police state, when anybody anywhere can be stopped by the police and it's not in their best interest to resist, or there'll be repercussions. That's the implied threat that the cop gave. Oh, you want to be on your way? Give me answers to my questions. It's like, oh, I see, we're in a police state now. Okay. I can't put up any kind of resistance here. Now, granted, it was perfunctory, but still inappropriate. Brief introduction to Dark Tower. This building was built in 1569. Originally, it was timbered. After restored as masonry. It was divided into 2 stories. The room on the top story was restored in 1986. Legend has it that when built, this tower hit by lightning and catch fire. A girl named Haigu died when she rescued the tower, so we call it Dark Tower after it was rebuilt. Where were the soldiers that a girl had to save it? They were all drunk. Dark Tower. I think I was in Scotland this summer too. I didn't have time to get over to Hadrian's Wall because it was the festival in Edinburgh. But I think that wall was probably built as much to keep the soldiers busy on the borders from getting drunk as it was to pacify the Pict, or at least separate themselves from the Picts. And the Scots. Keep people busy. The Great Wall, though, seems like it was a much larger effort. It was very much coordinated effort to secure the borders against the raiding nomadic tribe of Mongols, or it's the word that I saw Tartars sometimes used recently in one of the museums I was in. They were using the term Tartar. I think that actually was like Ming was Tartar as they were using it. And I'd have to look it up again. There was a use that I wasn't that familiar with. Tartar. What a different world we live in today, huh? The world is ridiculously more secure in terms of external security. I don't know how much more internal security is. I think there was a sign underneath that I didn't read.
In Asian town, no cell phones, no Facebook. They use this smoke every time on the tower.
That tour guide's talking about the smoke signals. I suppose internal security is probably much better. I guess I did read that sign. I thought there was one more. I used to play the sim game Rome which is a pretty good game as far as sim games go, especially if you took Latin in school. You'd climb up the Cursus Honorum from out in the provinces until you reached Rome and became emperor. You're crowned Caesar. And one of the ways you had a successful city, there were all these things you had to manage. They had internal and external security. The external security was against the invading tribes. So you'd build city walls and garrison them, train your troops, armor them. And then internal security, you had to build prefecture, constable posts in the city, like little tiny bobby police stations that you there's the modern elevated highway. That's probably what the Great Wall acted as more than anything else, was an elevated highway. Then it did a defensive wall. In reality, the reality of the situation. Well, I'm glad they have these little elevated walkways if you don't want to go down to go up. The biggest threats in that sim game Ancient Rome were petty crime and fire. And buildings would collapse if you didn't build engineer posts as well every so often. But by and large, it was self-organizing. You build roads, warehouses, houses, businesses, markets, etc., factories. And things would run pretty smoothly as long as you didn't do anything crazy. And you built things according to the rules of the game, which was no one wanted to live too close to a factory or too far away from entertainment. And the more little amenities you did, like lay marble on the street and that kind of stuff, the more you could up the real estate value. External security was fairly easy to manage as well. Fairly early on in building cities, if there was a known threat from a tribe, they'd tell you before you got your assignment that there were raiding tribes to the north and that kind of stuff. So you'd build a little wall, garrison it with towers, so men could, you'd see little men up on the wall, look just like the Great Wall. You'd build this little wall, and you put towers and gatehouses. You had to be careful where you put it, because you could cut off traders coming in and out if you weren't careful. But the traders would pass. It wasn't that sophisticated a game. The traders would usually just have to walk a little further, and it might delay shipments of goods in by a month if they had to walk all the way around a big wall with no gate. And then when the invaders came, your army would automatically march out of their fortress, and you'd have to click where to send them. That part of the game didn't work that well. You couldn't really micromanage the battle too much, which essentially is the genius of the Romans. Their army was professionalized by the time of the late Republic, and their administrative state was so well run that even when their armies were defeated, they could raise armies of men by mercenary force or usually conscription from the surrounding cities in Italy that wanted to join their state so rapidly that they'd have wars of attritions, first with the Greeks and then with Carthage, and that's how they won. Unfortunately, when the Republic dissolved and they became an empire like China did, you create a lot of problems. When the Cursus Honorum breaks down and people start skipping rungs on the ladder to become in charge, and you take someone like Emperor, who's really above the law, you start to create big problems, because in 1 or 2 generations you get people who have no competency delving into excess, misadministration. People who become too capable become a threat and get executed. And then you have these huge problems with succession. And similarly with the Praetorian Guard, the eunuchs in the imperial palace in Beijing started to become very powerful. Ah, that guy's up there doing some restoration work. Look at that. Let's go cut his rope and watch him. Ah. What do you think the guy would do if he's sitting there hammering a brick out, then he sees some tourist up there with a smirk on his face, one of those little stiletto knives? Shh, 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 shh. Huh? Black humor. Dark humor. I'm doing it. The dream of a lifetime. Kind of nice to do it by yourself too, to be honest. Yeah, but you see the same problems in the Chinese Empire within the dynasties, schemers, people behind the stage, generals getting too powerful that are competent generals that win wars that get executed or schemed against by others, executed, then exonerated. Good emperors who die young, bad emperors who live a long time, emperors that are being groomed and probably would be good candidates, but end up falling into excess, dying young, or making like one really bad decision, or being just incapable of dealing with problems like inflation and so on. I always think, who was it, Diocletian? Who wasn't like the best emperor, did a lot of crazy shit, but you have all these problems with the coinage and they just couldn't figure it out. The idea that, you'd have to remove X amount of coins that are bronze-based, gold-based, silver-based. So it's easier to just say, hey, we'll do feudalism. Give me X bushels and pigs for your taxes. Hello. Wonder how much this wall cost. They should come up with a figure for each emperor's reign and fix it. I guess it would stay relatively the same given inflation costs, you know, of construction. How much it cost to build one mile of wall. 1 mile of wall cost X amount to build.
윤수라. 그냥 내 완전 잡아다 줬잖아. 다음에 뭐 너서 가면 너 감을 쳐야 돼.
See if this guy will let me back over.
하나. 뭐도 하자자.
以前咧，人家走出去喺好近，可能呢個洞。
可以啊。
講以前係走住，人家死
可以啊。
人家走出去。左右你好。
What is up with this umbrella? I'm not hitting the button. Those Coolabar solar umbrellas are pretty good, but they start to deteriorate after 3-4 months to the point where if you use it as much as I do on a daily basis, you might want to get a new one. Whew. Let me get out of here before this guy ruins my video with the music he's playing. I hate it when something like that happens and I can't monetize the video because someone's got some song playing in the background. Retarded. Depends on how much of it plays, I guess, and all that. And honestly, I have no idea what song that is and if it's something that's copyrighted. It's Chinese, for Christ's sake. But having a video like that, a song like that play in the background of a video incidentally, could trigger copyright infringement. It's like so stupid. I hate it. You ever actually think about how much of the entertainment out there and things of that nature is predicated upon creating a completely fabricated fantasy world? Take any sitcom on TV. The most reality they give you is that it's set in some city that you've heard of. A lot of times it's filmed somewhere else or on some set. And the rest are familiar situations, but totally ridiculous if you actually look at what they are, analyze them. Like people live in ridiculously big apartments for New York City is one. I always note. The 20-somethings of Friends, and there's some excuse like, oh, it's a sublet from the lady's grandmother. Oh, I see. That's why they have this ridiculously huge apartment where they all live. And you look at a video like mine, I feel like I'm trying to do something that's of historical value. If it isn't now, it will be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know. It'll be a little slice of history, you know, what things were like here a generation or two ago. Problem is, if it can survive that long on YouTube without someone deciding I infringed on their copyright and filing some stupid claim. If that happens a few times, they'll like take your whole account down and delete it. Your whole account could get deleted because you're walking around and some song like that's playing in the background. You had no intention of, no control over it. Now there's supposed to be fair use and blah 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 and all that. I don't think you get much protection at all from that. If someone says you used it, it's mine. I didn't give you permission to use it. You put it up without my permission. What are you gonna do? Take it right down. Now, where have I reached? What position have I reached here? I should take a look. It's 148. Gosh, have I only gone this little bit? Let's see, let me color code the section of the actual wall I've been on. How many kilometers have I gone? 1.43 miles. Gosh, I'm not even halfway done. Whew. Start a new video here. Take a picture. Especially in China, where you come out here on a clear day. I waited for 2 weeks for a nice day to get out here and not have smog. And someone's smoking a cigarette when I take my rest break. And this is one of the less touristy areas to visit of the Great Wall. Badaling is the area that folks go to for it's the most heavily restored area, but it's like supposed to be the McDonald's version of the Great Wall, which I don't think is such a bad thing. It's something to consider if you're only here for a short amount of time and you want to combine it with a trip to the Ming tombs. It's very close to that. You could do them both in the same day, Badaling. This area is much further to get to. It's worth the extra expense. One of the signs said that the view looking either this way or the way we were looking as we walked up is what they show every morning on CCTV. I guess it's similar to back when they used to have the national anthem and the flag before the networks went off the air for the night. Was that back in like the 1950s? You're not supposed to smoke up here. I think they're worried about fire. That tourist was having a cigarette and it was really noxious. I think it's insensitive to people who are trying to enjoy themselves and exerting themselves. I'm looking down to the entrance to the Great Wall of China at Jinshanling. It's actually a cable car, but I don't see where it is just yet. Maybe it'll come into view a little further. So I've passed the first and second towers, and I'm here off on a spur that allowed them to control the pass here at Jinshanling. By giving them the ability to flank anyone trying to come through the pass. It was about a 3-hour ride from Beijing on the dot. I did the trip through my hostel, which I think is the best way to visit. Very low stress, a bit more expensive, but for something like this. I was concerned about doing a trip too with such a large group of people. If I had 15-20 people on our little bus that the hostel contracted with to ride us out here. But you don't have much interaction. Most people are coupled up and sleep on the way up. And then once you get on the wall, you can spread out and do your own thing. I don't think you need to worry about dehydration. There's plenty of touts selling liquids. They'll charge you a bit more, but I've heard it depends on how thirsty you look, what they're gonna charge. But, you know, for the sake of not becoming dehydrated, you pay 10 yuan instead of, you know, a bottle of water. If you bought a big case of them at the gas station we stopped at on the way here, it could have cost you as little as 20 yuan for, you know, 25 bottles, probably less than 1 yuan each. So yeah, you're paying 10 times what it probably should cost, but that's still maybe $1.50, 10 yuan, so still cheaper than getting a bottle of water in an airport in the United States. Jinshanling Great Wall. Brief introduction of barrier walls. And it says the same thing. Not only defense, but also counterattack. Pioneering work in the Great Wall of G-Town. So you can see here we were out on the transverse earlier, the square terrace. These steps get pretty steep. I've heard the incline in places on the wall can be as much as 70%.